Hey everybody, it's LavenderTowne, and today I'm putting waterproof art supplies to the test. I really wanted to do a nice, satisfying sort of like unboxing or unwrapping of the pen and the notebook, but I failed so spectacularly I had to leave it in. Honestly, 0 out of 10 for packaging. I even like messed up my fingernail opening the notebook. Maybe I was just unlucky today, but anyway, once I finally got it unsheathed from its paper prison, it was time to actually take a look at what the paper looked like. Honestly, it felt pretty normal. I expected it to feel kind of like thick or sort of laminated, but the pages were pretty thin. They felt about the same. They were a little bit smoother than usual, but that was about it. I was really lucky, and the day I wanted to film this, it was actually raining outside, so I decided for the first test of this paper I would do as the brand name would suggest and try this out in real rain. You can see how gloomy and Pacific Northwesty it was outside. So once there was a sufficient amount of raindrops on it, I decided to just start drawing and sort of see how the pen would hold up. At first I was really happy with it, but then I started to get worried because I noticed that every time the pen hit a raindrop, it did start to smudge a little. It wasn't too dramatic. I've definitely dealt with art supplies that do worse, but it made me really worried because later in this video I'm definitely going to put it to a much harsher test than a few tiny little raindrops on the surface of the paper. Also, sorry for my a little bit too close and a little wobbly camera work on this particular one. I couldn't figure out any way to have my camera set up on the porch, so I'm literally holding it in one hand while I draw with the other with the sketch pad in my lap. So yeah, not my best work as far as cinematography goes, but I was really happy though that the raindrops were just completely sitting on top of the paper, like no amount of time caused them to sink in at all, which is really good for the integrity of the paper for later on experiments. And I decided not to spend too much time on this one since this is sort of the easiest challenge for these particular art supplies. So I just did like a quick messy little ink doodle, drew my little like persona standing in the rain. I thought that would be appropriate. I was really happy with like the actual drawing experience on here. Obviously I wish I could have gotten a blank Write in the Rain notebook, but it didn't distract me too much, and I actually liked how smooth the pen was. It felt like really nice and natural to draw with, and it has like a variable amount of pigmentation, which could be annoying, but actually just made it feel more like pencil. So yeah, I was honestly kind of a fan. So here is the first test, and honestly I'm a little worried because it already started to smudge a bit, so I'm really not sure how it's going to react to underwater conditions, but even if it doesn't work, I'm going to try to find some kind of art supply or something that will make it so that I can at least draw something. I'm really concerned about some of these little smudgy areas and areas where the raindrop really like carried the pigment. I decided for the next two tests I should tear out the piece of paper because otherwise I might end up ruining this entire thing, and who knows what I might need it for in the future. So we're gonna see how these guys do. First the shower test and then the fully underwater test. So let's get to that. Honestly, the things I do for YouTube. This was by far more miserable than drawing out in the cold rain. The direct pummeling of the shower water from our weird downstairs shower that no one ever actually uses was quite unpleasant to draw in, but I was extremely pleasantly surprised that even though this was much more like saturated and intense water conditions, the pen actually seemed to work just fine. It really, in a weird way, almost stuck better to the paper once the paper was all wet. It seemed like it had a harder time with some dry paper and some wet paper versus it just being completely soaked. Also, yes, I am drawing on a white cutting board because, man, the filming conditions in here are not ideal, and I didn't want to draw directly on the grubby shower floor. So yeah, I gotta wash that cutting board. I better remember to do that before I cut any apples or anything on there. I was really, really impressed, and this made me feel a lot more confident about the final stage, which I was really, really worried about after the rain test. Honestly, the main reason I had trouble with this was that I was again holding my phone in one hand and my paper kept slipping around while the water was like sort of soaking it and carrying it away. And it was just really hard to see what I was drawing because the water was just like sort of coming down really intensely. I tried to draw like a mermaid. It's a little bit ugly, but at least you guys can see how well this actually works. Like the ink lines go down pretty nicely and they didn't feather too much at all. So I was honestly like really shocked. I expected this was where this whole video was basically going to go completely south and I wasn't even going to be able to try the last step. So I was really happy with how this one turned out, even if the art's kind of janky. One of the things I was most impressed by was that I could actually go over lines and give it more like line variation and basically more like intense pigmentation in places, and the paper didn't falter at all. It wasn't like difficult, it didn't like tear through or really cause any damage at all, which is really surprising because sometimes going over the same lines over and over even damages like normal paper. So I honestly don't know what is going on with this paper that makes it so strong, but it didn't give me any problems even when I was coloring in the eyes really dark or going back over the lines of the hair. It was just really resilient. It felt somehow dry and saturated with water at the same time. I'm very curious to see at the end if it dries flat or if it dries sort of bubbly like most paper does. Alright, now it's time to get serious. I filled up this brownie tin with some water. Cold water, unfortunately. I don't know why I thought that was a good idea, but anyway, it's time to saturate this paper completely in water and press it down to the bottom and see if I can draw. I immediately felt a sense of dread as soon as I pushed it down because this just felt like something wrong, like highlighting a library book or something. I was also really worried about actually putting the pen tip into the water because while I understand how a pen could work in the rain, actually submerging the whole thing in water seemed like a really bad idea. I expected that at best it was going to be able to write a few lines and then water would get up into the pen and it would all be over.
What? I cannot believe that this works. Like, I actually can't believe this. This is insane.
I've never been one for overly dramatic YouTube reactions, but even I had to be a little bit taken aback and surprised that I was actually drawing completely underwater. When I came up with this idea, I honestly expected pretty gruesome results. I knew, especially because it was only marketed to work in rain, which is not the same as being completely underwater. I figured that I would have sort of a fun mess and a chaotic sort of time. I didn't think I would actually be drawing, and honestly the hardest part about it was just holding the paper down so it didn't float up to the surface, and also dealing with the fact that every time I moved my hand too much, the surface of the water rippled and made it hard to see my own drawing.
This is making me like a little bit seasick.
Something interesting I did notice is that the pen was sort of shooting off little black specks that started to float in the water. Nothing too distracting, and it didn't stick to the paper at all, but it was kind of interesting. I wonder if that's kind of how the pen keeps working, is like it's just continually pushing out ink and not allowing any water to get inside. It was really cool. You can also see around the edges of the paper it's getting a little dark, like the paper is giving up, but it didn't actually start to get any weaker or sort of come apart, which is something I was definitely worried about with long-term submerging into water. At this point, honestly, I was starting to want to see what it would take to get this paper to give up on me, so I wanted to try to push it as far as I could. I kept it in the water longer than I probably would have to. I wanted to keep working on the sketch as long as possible just to see if there was going to be a point at which it started to come apart, and I decided to go over multiple areas and make them nice and dark, especially because the pen comes out sort of gray at first, and I wanted to make sure that it looked like a distinct sort of finished sketch. So I started lining over certain areas that I wanted it to be darker or thicker, as I would with a normal drawing. And honestly, I was really nervous because I did feel like at some point this paper was going to tear. It was going to start sort of like giving up on me or bunching around the sharp edge of the pen. But it just wouldn't. Like, no matter what I did, it seemed like the drawing was completely unaffected. The paper stayed strong even though it was getting a little gray around the edges. Like, there was nothing that I did that could damage it at all, and it was like, honestly, like, kind of insane.
Just to be clear, like, this paper didn't actually say it was waterproof. I kind of didn't expect it to literally be completely waterproof. Like, the hardest part about this is just holding down the paper because it keeps coming up. So confused at how they invented this technology.
Now is probably the time when you might be wondering, what is the practical application of this? And honestly, I don't know that there is one for artists. I just really wanted to see if it was possible. As soon as I saw that there was like a waterproof quote unquote paper and pen, I had to try it out because I thought there's no way that this is actually going to work. And I basically wanted to see at what limit of water you could actually still like draw something on it, but I haven't found a limit yet. So basically I just think it's really a cool thing. It's just really neat. Yeah, look at how much I can color in like her lips. I wanted to give her like black lipstick because I was like, there's no way this paper will be able to handle that, and I went really hard on it, and it's still just like, it just laid down perfectly as if I was not literally submerging it in water.
Well, I feel like that's pretty definitive. I'm in shock. I genuinely, especially after the rain test had some smudging and stuff, I genuinely thought like that I wasn't even going to be able to post this video because it was going to fail so badly. But this is like, I mean, this is better than I could have possibly imagined. I cannot believe that there's something out there that can do this. Like, this is insane. This is actually insane.
The brand is called Right in the Rain, so if you want to try it out yourself, that's what you gotta look up. I just found it at a bookstore that's in town, so I assume you could probably get it on like online as well. And it's spelled R-I-T-E, so like funeral rites. Not sure why. Oh, and as promised, here they all are when they dried out completely. I didn't press them under anything, and they stayed relatively flat. They still buckled a little bit, but way less than I was expecting. This is actually like pretty good considering that they were so soaked in water. And I think that if they were all pressed against each other inside the notebook, it would do even better. Thanks for watching this super weird video, and I'll see you in the next one. Special thanks to my patrons, including Bella Story, Braggy, Calpompon, Lion, Clockwork Construct, Dr. Casket, Ilaria Louie, Elizabeth Alvin, Gray the Animator, Yara Formoso, Ivan Rodriguez, JJJ, Joseph Copel, Blah, Micah Dactyl, Mr. Dr. Pants, Nora Cornelison, Ollie, Pixel Badlands, Rosie Warlock, Rudy, Sergeant Pendulum, Some Mediocre Artists, The Artsy Moose, Tom Javid Johansson, Yaboy ST, and Zoe Stardust.